welcome again to all of you to this wonderful luncheon in this wonderful space. Several of us who grew up on the East Coast were chatting earlier today, and if you grew up in the East Coast, at least in my era, a kid trip to the United Nations was something that one did in 3rd grade or 4th grade or maybe 5th. But none of us recall being invited to the delegates' dining room on our tour. So thank you very much to all who arranged this, and thank you to those of you who prepared and served our meal today. You can look at this table and see what an extraordinary and short afternoon we're going to have by just observing who is at the table. It's going to be a wonderful afternoon, and I am pleased and honored to be your MC, if you will, and Justice Breyer, we are particularly honored by your presence here with us today. Thank you very much, and I know you will be a highlight of our afternoon. I will begin by inviting Henry Molina, please, to come to the podium, the President of the Supreme Court of the Dominican Republic, where we will next be meeting.
Dear colleagues and friends, each World Law Congress honors the vision Charles Reigns, Winston Churchill, Ed Warren, and many others who recognize the importance of uniting the global legal community to support the rule of law. Although issues, their time may seem different, they are similar in many ways. Today, as in the past, the rule of law faces growing challenges. When the rule of law is questioned, so is democracy. These challenges come from many fronts: widespread economic equality, new forms of the authoritarianism, lack of judicial independence, effectiveness, limit access to the justice, and many other factors. To continue discussion such crucial matters for the well-being of our civilization, my colleagues from the Dominican Republic judiciary system join me today in inviting you to come into our country on February 2025 for the World Law Congress. As you many know, the Dominican Republic has worked tirelessly to overcome many difficulties. Our average GDP growth has exceeded 5% each year since the turn of the century until the recent pandemic. We have reduced poverty by more than half. We have also worked to the strength our judicial system to promote justice and growth. By hosting 2025 World Law Congress, we seek to share our experience with you and the entire world. We aim to continue the vision of Charles Reigns, Winston Churchill, and Ed Warren. Allow me to express in this way: we thrive and achieve in our justice system what we have accomplished in baseball to play in the major leagues. Please join us in Santo Domingo in the winter of 2025. We look forward to welcoming you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and we all look forward to being there as well. It is now my pleasure to introduce again my dear friend and my ABA president, Deborah Enix-Ross, who will present and speak to the World Jurist Association Medal of Honor winners. Madam President.
Thank you, Madam President. I love the sound of Madam President. So, Once again, I have the privilege and pleasure to present World Justice Association Medal of Honor Awards this afternoon to two distinguished individuals, Brian Preston and Luke Lavrysen. Justice Preston is Chief Judge of the Land and Environment Court in New South Wales in Australia. Before his appointment in 2005, he was a senior counsel practicing primarily in New South Wales in environmental, planning, administrative, and property law. Justice Preston has lectured in postgraduate environmental law for more than 23 years, principally at the University of Sydney, but also at other universities in Australia and overseas. He has established 2 law courses, environmental dispute resolution and biodiversity law. Justice Preston is the author of Australia's first book on environmental litigation. We heard that this morning, but it bears repeating. Australia's first book on environmental litigation, along with nearly 100 articles, books, chapters, and reviews on environmental law, administrative law, and criminal law. Justice Preston holds editorial positions for environmental law publications and has been involved in a number of international environmental consultancies and capacity building programs, including for the judiciaries in Indonesia, Kenya, China, Trinidad and Tobago, Thailand, and Sri Lanka. He is the recipient of many awards and commendations due to his commitment to promote effective environmental adjudication in Asia. And he has provided significant support to the Environmental Institute of Australia and New Zealand. Now you understand why it is a pleasure to present the World Jurist Association's Medal of Honor to the Honorable Justice Brian Peterson. I will also, shall I continue? We'll do the presentation. We're being very efficient. We call that doing this in a New York minute. Luke Lavrysen is president of the Constitutional Court of Belgium and president of the European Union Forum on Judges for the Environment. He is also a part-time professor in environmental law at Ghent University. Dr. Lavrysen obtained the degree of Doctor in Law at Ghent University. Until 2000, he was legal secretary at the Belgian Court of Arbitration in Brussels. He subsequently became state councilor, and he is now a judge in the Belgian Constitutional Court. He successively combined all these functions with the function of scientific researcher, voluntary assistant, academic counsel, and visiting professor at Ghent University in the domain of environmental law. He is currently president of the European Forum of Judges for the Environment. And I know we were inspired by his remarks earlier today. It is my pleasure to present the WJA Medal of Honor to Dr. Luke Lavrysen.
Please welcome the Honorable Brian Preston as Deborah Enix-Ross presents the Medal of Honor.
A life of service to others is a life well served. I have strived through my career to serve others. The others are the planet and its people. The planet is our wondrous spaceship Earth, so rich in biodiversity. Its people are our fellow travellers in this precious spaceship. My service has been in the law, environmental law in particular. The law is a form of social ordering. Environmental law orders humanity's relations with the environment. The ordering is not only of the laws, but also of the legal institutions that administer, uphold, and enforce the law. I have served in these legal institutions. I was the founding solicitor of Australia's first public interest environmental legal centre, the Environmental Defenders Office. I have been a practising solicitor. I've been a practising barrister and later a senior counsel, or the equivalent of Queen's Counsel, or now King's Counsel. I have served the last 18 years as Chief Judge of the world's first Environmental Superior Court of Record, and I also serve on the New South Wales Courts of Appeal and Courts of Criminal Appeal. I have taught environmental law at universities throughout the world, and I have published extensively on environmental law. The golden thread running through all these modes of service to the law has been the desire to uphold the law and the rule of law. The law and the rule of law are the bulwarks against the exploitation, abuse, and injury to the planet and its people. This makes the recognition by the World Jurist Association of my service to the law and the rule of law so special. The World Jurist Association is an organisation formed for and continues to strive for the upholding of the rule of law. That the World Jurist Association has seen value in my service to the law and the rule of law is humbling. You honour me with your award of the Medal of Honour. I will cherish it. But it will also renew my energy and passion to continue to serve environmental law and the environmental rule of law. Thank you.
Please join me in first welcoming Ambassador Michael McKinley, who will present the World Justice Medal of Honour to the Honourable Luke Lavrysen.
So, Luke Lavrysen, please. Okay, thank you. But that was true. So I'll take it for you too. Okay. Please.
So I didn't prepare anything for today because I didn't know why I deserved this Medal of Honor. I was trying to figure out, but no one was telling me that. Secondly, I don't, so I thank, of course, the association for awarding this, to giving this medal to me. I don't know who is behind the scenes suggesting my name, so I just try to do my job. And I try to do it as good as possible. So on the international level, I got involved in this judiciary and environmental law when I was asked in 2002, when I was just 1 year
justice in the Constitutional Court, to attend the Rio +10 conference in Johannesburg, and they asked me to do it because it was the first judiciary conference, the Global Judicial Symposium on the rule of law and sustainable development. And they asked me because I was a professor of environmental law and justice, and there I met one of the predecessors of Brian Preston, Paul Stein, and he inspired me. And then a little bit later we had with UNEP, the United Nations Environmental Programme, a planning meeting in the headquarters of UNEP in Nairobi, and then we decided to create also the European Union Forum of Judges for the Environment, because in the European Union we have this common environmental law, and started with that, and then finally get also involved not only with UNEP but also in the Global Judicial Institute on the environment, together with Brian. So I know him. I think the first time we met was in Geneva, when we tried to develop training material, judicial training material that can be used for judges who like to know more about environmental law. With that, I finish here. Thank you very much, and I feel very honored. Thank you.
Thank you. It is now my privilege to call to the podium Beatrice Meillet, Minister Consular and Legal Advisor at the Permanent Mission of Canada to the UN, who will introduce and speak about our next award winner, Chief Justice Richard Wagner of Canada. Thank you.
Good morning or good lunch. It's my pleasure to welcome you at the United Nations, which I work in every day. And we all remember the UN Charter. And let me quote, because I think it's particularly important today as we chose the UN to be the host of this event. We, the peoples of the United Nations, determine to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, which twice in our lifetime has brought untold sorrow to mankind, and to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of the human person, in the equal rights of men and women, and of nations large and small, and to establish conditions under which justice and respect for the obligations arising from treaties and other source of international law can be maintained, and to promote social progress and better standards of life in larger freedom. Well, a famous Canadian, John Peters Humphrey, was the architect of the UN Universal Declaration of Human Rights, a milestone document that in the history of human rights. As you know, Mr. Humphrey actually wrote and inspired himself, after inspiring himself from the legal work of all different culture on all regions of the world, to translate the vision of the Charter into an instrument that would lead the way. And so he actually drafted the first draft of the Universal Declaration that now this year we're celebrating the 75th anniversary. And I think that why I'm making reference to that is because it shows that Canada is quite open to the world. And as you walked in the building today, you actually crossed the Canadian doors. And if you have looked, or you will look when you exit, you will see the reference to Pax, Veritas, Fraternitas, and Justitia. Indeed, Justitia. The declaration is quite important in a Canadian context because it inspired our Charter of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedom, which had the long-lasting impact, and for which the Canadian Supreme Court, the final court of appeal, is the guarantor now of individual rights and freedom. To do so, the court continued a tradition of inspiring itself from the world And as the Chief Justice shared with me yesterday and today, we all can learn from each other in this space, which is the root of this organization. So as a lawyer and legal advisor here, it's my privilege to welcome the Chief Justice, the Right Honorable Richard Wagner, who was appointed to the Supreme Court of Canada in 2012 and as Chief Justice at the end of 2017. From his first set of public remarks to today, the Chief Justice has been devoted to upholding the crucial principles of open courts, judicial independence, and access to justice. A key component of all those three is transparency. The Chief Justice strongly believed that when courts are open to the public and the media, people can see for themselves that Canada's judiciary is fair, impartial, and independent of outside influences. To do so, the court maintains strong relationship with journalists through who cover its work, through expert media briefing on its decision, annual meetings with reporter. Hearings are webcast live, and certainly there's many initiatives to grant transparency and accessibility to the court's work. He has built on this foundation by holding a one-hour national news conference every year, but also publishing the annual report of the court that explains its works and activity. Twice since his appointment, the court has actually traveled in Canada to hear cases in particular provinces where hundreds of people lined up outside the courthouse to attend the hearings. These visits also included meetings with high school and university students, enabling every Canadian to see how the law in action. These events have promoted public understandings about judicial independence, the rule of law, and open courts. They've also opened dialogue between members of our judiciary and members of the public. The Chief Justice is a steadfast advocate for better access to justice from all Canadians. It's a social imperative. And in that vein, he's encouraged more funding for legal aids, but also modernizing the justice system. Procedures at the Supreme Court for self-represented litigants have also been simplified. The Chief Justice often says that a lack of access to justice reinforce existing inequities, and that access to justice is about getting good justice to everyone, not perfect justice for a lucky few. The COVID-19 pandemic presented challenges on all of us, and in that context, the Chief Justice has established and co-chaired with the Minister of Justice an action committee on court operations in response to the pandemic. The committee provided a forum for engagement and coordination between the judiciary and governments from across Canada to support courts as they implement change, innovations that are going to be now long-lasting through the digitalization of court services to ensure they are accessible and inclusive. The Chief Justice never misses an opportunity to explain the principle of judicial independence and how democracy is impossible without it. After all, judicial independence isn't for judges, it's for the public. The Chief Justice is alert to the international decrease in judicial independence and denounces all threats and attacks on his colleagues around the world. And he's also taken steps in Canada to enhance the independence of the judiciary. Chief Justice Wagner champions lifelong learning for judges. He says it promotes the culture of excellence and that an investment in judicial education is an investment in the rule of law and democracy. He co-chairs the National Judicial Institute that we discussed earlier yesterday, which is the primary education provider for Canada's judges and has undertaken judicial reforms project with partners on every continent. It's really my honor to invite the Right Honorable Justice Richard Wagner on this podium to receive the Medal of Honor.
Thank you very much.
Whoops. Distingués invités, distinguished guests, distinguidos invitados, buenas tardes. Madame Maillé, merci infiniment pour votre présentation, beaucoup trop généreuse, mais fort aimable. Je vous en remercie. I would like to offer my warmest congratulations to other award recipients. Your strong, brave, and effective leadership is making our world more sustainable and socially just. It is my pleasure to be in your company today. To the World Jurist Association, I thank you for the honor you have bestowed upon me. Quiero que sepan cuánto me anima y seguir promoviendo la independencia judicial y el Estado de Derecho. Sometimes it can feel lonely to speak about and seek to uphold the principles of judicial independence and the rule of law. They can sound abstract and feel remote. They may also feel and be taken for granted, especially where democracy is strong and stable, for example, in Canada. But it is largely true that we often value what we have when it is gone, when it is too late. Justice is not only a service, but it is a human need, just like water and food, and must be considered as such. There is a thirst for truth and peace, and we should always strive to satisfy it. Recent world events and the rise of autocracy around the globe have increased awareness about these values and principles. But hate and division seem to have grown at the same rate. There is so much work to be done. This is why I am grateful for the World Jurist Association and its international network of leaders who take action and inspire others to do the same. As Canada's Chief Justice, it is my duty to speak out to support the rule of law in Canada and abroad. De hecho, es mi responsabilidad proteger la independencia judicial y defender en el Estado de Derecho cuando se ve amenazado. Many people misunderstand the principle of judicial independence. It does not exist to serve judges, but those we serve. It means judges are free to make decisions based on the facts and the law without any undue influence. Judicial independence is crucial to our democracies. An independent judiciary can fearlessly protect citizens from government overreach, hold the state to account, and defend individual rights and freedoms. An independent judiciary also fosters public confidence in the administration of justice. Knowing laws will be fairly and impartially applied provides citizens with the security of an honest and orderly system of government. It is essential for the legitimacy of our institutions. Judges are not politicians. Politicians are not judges. You are different. You are equal. We are meant to complement each other. Preserving judicial independence is about preserving this understanding and trust. Every safe and stable society needs it. Today, unfortunately, there are too many examples of what happens when judicial independence and the rule of law are threatened or openly under attack. Russia serves as a particularly relevant case study. We have seen how judges uphold political repression and crush dissent. Journalists are punished for reporting the truth, just as regular citizens are sentenced to jail for criticizing the war in Ukraine. Sadly, those events remind us that judges may only protect people's freedom of speech when they do not fear reprisals from the state. Canada may not be a superpower in the traditional sense of the word, but our country certainly is a democratic superpower. Our courts are open and accessible. They are fair and impartial. Judges are free and independent. They uphold the rule of law and fundamental rights and freedoms. And we promote a culture of judicial excellence through ongoing training to ensure we maintain a strong judiciary. We cannot take for granted, however, what has taken so long to build. No society is immune against abuses and misinformation. We need to remain vigilant, and we must all play a role in protecting our democratic values and principles. Once again, I would like to express my heartfelt thanks to the World Jurist Association for this precious award and for bringing together so many effective and influential leaders who are committed to upholding the rule of law. Merci, thank you, gracias.
It is now my high privilege and distinct honor to introduce by video the 42nd President of the United States, Bill Clinton.
I'm honored to join all of you gathered at the United Nations today to celebrate the opening session of the New York World Law Congress. I want to thank the World Jurist Association and its chairman, Javier Cremades, for hosting today's program and for the important role the organization plays in our international community. For 60 years now, the WJA has worked to strengthen the rule of law around the globe so we can build a peaceful, more inclusive set of societies where the rights of all are respected. Today, you're honoring outstanding individuals who spent their lives advancing that same noble goal. I'm very proud that I had the opportunity to nominate one of these honorees, Justice Stephen Breyer, to the United States Supreme Court. Throughout his 27 years on the court, Justice Breyer was a consensus builder whose rulings were rooted in a desire to strengthen our democracy, promote equality, and make a positive difference in people's lives. His encyclopedic knowledge of the law is surpassed only by the character and judgment with which he served, and he is very deserving of this prestigious award. I must also note that he was the first justice, at least that I ever noticed, to ask us to look at what the law was in other countries and how other people were handling similar challenges to ours. So congratulations to Justice Breyer and to all the honorees, and best wishes to all of you for a productive session of the World Law Congress.
And to award the medal and speak for a moment further about Justice Breyer, please welcome Brad Karp, the chairman of Paul Weiss and a trustee of the World Justice Foundation.
Maybe a little bit more than a moment. There's a lot to cover. Thank you very much. It's my great honor and privilege to present the WJA Medal of Honor to the distinguished jurist, scholar, and public servant, retired Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer. As you've heard, this award recognizes individuals who have made outstanding contributions to the rule of law. Prior recipients include such luminaries as Chief Justice Earl Warren, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, King Felipe of Spain, Nelson Mandela, and Winston Churchill. It's impossible to imagine a more deserving recipient of this award than Justice Breyer, who has spent more than 60 years promoting and safeguarding the rule of law. Everyone knows about Justice Breyer's legendary career on the United States Supreme Court, having served with distinction for 28 years leading the court's moderate liberal wing, adept at forging consensus and compromise across ideological lines. But Stephen Breyer's entire life, a truly remarkable and unimaginably impactful life, has been committed to supporting and protecting the rule of law in its multiple and varied dimensions. Justice Breyer has been a champion of judicial independence, a protector of democracy, an advocate for human rights, a promoter of international cooperation, and an adherent of principle and precedent throughout his professional life. Justice Breyer has been one of our nation's most prolific and influential writers, writing numerous books and some 525 opinions on the Supreme Court and hundreds more when he served as a distinguished First Circuit judge. These writings, these opinions have shaped the law, enriched our public discourse, and promoted the rule of law. Whether writing for the majority or in dissent, throughout his distinguished career, Justice Breyer has helped shape the law on every issue of consequence in American society, and did so during a time when the court has been sharply divided ideologically. His decisions have had an enormous impact, not just in the United States, but around the globe as well. Justice Breyer has often said that his approach to judicial service reflected the influences of his early life and his extraordinarily varied career. After graduating from Stanford with highest honors in 1959, Justice Breyer studied philosophy and economics at Oxford on a Marshall Scholarship and then earned a law degree at Harvard. He would later teach there. In fact, he taught me there more than 40 years ago, becoming our nation's leading expert on administrative law. Justice Breyer served in the U.S. Army and in all three branches of federal government before the age of 40. As a law clerk to Supreme Court Justice Arthur Goldberg, as a prosecutor in the Department of Justice, and as a member of the Watergate prosecution team, and as chief counsel to the late Senator Ted Kennedy, then chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Early in his career, Justice Breyer even managed to work on the Warren Commission, which investigated the assassination of President Kennedy. Justice Breyer has said that his diverse experiences as a public servant imbued him with a deep appreciation for the importance of compromise and the need to recognize and to respect competing points of view. In 1980, Justice Breyer was appointed as a judge to the First Circuit Court of Appeals, and while a circuit judge, he played an influential role in creating the federal sentencing guidelines. In 1994, as we just heard, Justice Breyer was appointed by President Clinton to the U.S. Supreme Court and was overwhelmingly confirmed by the Senate 87 to 9, bipartisan achievement that sadly seems far out of reach today. During his Senate confirmation hearings, Justice Breyer expressed his belief that the law has to have a heart, not only a head, lest it become a sterile set of rules removed from human problems. Justice Breyer would return to these themes again and again through his nearly 3 decades on the court. Today, as our country continues its descent into warring ideological factions, Justice Breyer provides a shining example of an alternative path, a humane, consensus-driven, progressive, with a distinctly pragmatic approach to jurisprudence. Perhaps more than any other judge in recent memory, Justice Breyer has elaborated a coherent, alternative approach to originalism or textualism, which is the theory that restricts a judge's job to mechanically interpreting the rules of our Constitution literally, and only as the framers of our Constitution reputedly would have understood those words at the time they were written. In his seminal 2005 book, Active Liberty, Justice Breyer posits that the framers of the U.S. Constitution never intended for future generations of judges to resolve contemporary controversies by speculating how the framers themselves would have resolved them. Instead, their goal was to promote what Justice Breyer calls active and constant participation in the collective power. In other words, active liberty. In the view of Justice Breyer, the Constitution not only sets limits on official power, but it also ensures the right of ordinary citizens to shape the workings of government. According to Justice Breyer, judges have a constructive, democracy-enhancing role to play in interpreting issues raised by disputes in ways that help communities deal better with the problems that have caused those issues into being. This is a desperately needed approach today, one that is sadly conspicuously absent from most modern jurisprudence. While Justice Breyer has been known as a pragmatic consensus builder, an individual who believes that progress can be made by walking the halls and speaking with and listening to his fellow justices, he also believes that when fundamental rights and due process are threatened, a judge is duty-bound to dissent and to express his reasoning clearly and forcefully, something he has done repeatedly on the most consequential issues of our time. Among Justice Breyer's greatest legacies are the thousands of lawyers he has mentored and taught over many decades. Many have become remarkable lawyers and jurists in their own rights. When Justice Breyer stepped down from the court, he paved the way for one of his former law clerks, Ketanji Brown Jackson, to take his place in a historic confirmation. To his legions of law clerks, colleagues, and friends, Justice Breyer is beloved, brilliant, funny, open-hearted, the epitome of civility and grace, modest, approachable. In his newest professional chapter, as chair of the ABA Rule of Law Initiative, Justice Breyer is working today, as he always has, to support and to protect the rule of law. He is overseeing the 20-member board and regional councils with the aim of promoting justice, economic opportunity, and human dignity through the rule of law in more than 130 countries. And he has returned to Harvard Law School to teach, helping develop yet another generation of lawyers. Justice Breyer, on behalf of the World Jurist Association and the entire global legal community, I thank you and I salute you for your extraordinary service and your enduring legacy. You are a source of inspiration and admiration for all of us. Please join me in congratulating and honoring Justice Stephen Breyer as we present him with the WJA's most prestigious award, the Medal of Honor.
My goodness. Who are the 9 people who voted against me? I don't, thank you, President Clinton, and thank you, Association, and thank you, Brian, for that amazing introduction. I'll try to live up to some of it. What I thought I'd mention briefly, receiving this award, of course, is a great honor with the other people who've received it and being in this room and seeing you all here and knowing what you're doing. I mean, where are we? We're at the UN. Okay, when was this founded? 1963, Earl Warren and Charles Ryan, President of the ABA. And why were they doing this? I think, it's imaginary, but I think only a few years before that, with Dean Acheson, Harry Truman, the Europeans, de Gasperi and Adenauer and all those people, they had, somebody, all right. They had helped to create this organization. Can you hear me all right? Okay. They had helped to create it. What was the idea? The idea here in the US and with our allies and with some of our enemies who have become allies. Well, what we're going to do in the future is called really 4 or 5 principles. It's human rights, democracy, equality, rule of law, more free trade, and solving our problems together. That was it. And that meant something in 1945, 46, 47. It meant we're not going to repeat what we just had. And over time, it became sort of cliche-like. And at this moment, we're not sure. I think that's the problem. So on the airplane coming down, I thought, well, I'm going to be at the UN, you know, which is a lot of different countries here. And I'm going to be with a group of people, many of whom they're from Spain or Latin America, and they speak Spanish a lot better than I don't. I pretend to sometimes. And Quebec, and Belgium, where they speak some French, again, better than I do. And a few stories came into my mind. Would you like to hear? Shortly. Okay, story one. The short story, no, the second shortest short story ever written. I'll tell you the whole thing. Cuando despertó, el dinosaurio todavía estaba allí. When he woke up, the dinosaur was still there. Let's think about that one. It may have more meaning for us in this organization. That baddie part of people has not gone away. And those ideals aren't quite fulfilled. Now, French, same. But it's not so funny. But it means a lot to me. If you haven't read it, read Camus' La Peste, the Plague. Fabulous book. Tells the story in Iran of a plague. Really the Nazis in France. Last page. He says, why have I written this book? He says, pour vous dire ce qu'ils ont fait. Les résidents d'Oran. Quelques-uns pour le bien, quelques-uns pour le mal. Mais aussi pour expliquer ce que c'est qu'un médecin qui fait du bien sans philosophie. Simplement le faire. I wrote this to tell you what those people were like, and some good ones, some bad ones during the plague. And I want to tell you what a doctor is like, who simply does good without thinking about it. He's not a philosopher. He just does it. Mais première partie, plus important, c'est pour vous dire que le bacillus de la peste ne meurt jamais. To tell you that that plague germ never dies. Il reste. He goes into remission. Il reste dans les couloirs, il reste dans les greniers, il reste dans les dossiers, he rests in the hallways, in the attics, in the file cabinets. Il reste pour un jour se réveiller, to wake up one day, et renvoyer ses rats pour l'éducation ou pour le malheur de l'homme, to one day wake up and send his rats again for the education or the misfortune of a city. Renvoyer ses rats dans une cité heureux, in a once happy city. Yeah, okay? So we have it in 3 languages because we're at the UN. And I don't purport that they were well pronounced. Why? What do the English say? My wife, what do Americans say? My wife, who is English, but she said to each of our grandchildren, $20 if you memorize Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. Yeah, why? Because those first 2 lines, which is all we need, our fathers, 80 years ago, 407 years ago, our fathers came upon this, built upon this continent, or founded upon a new nation created in liberty and based on the proposition that all men are created equal. Today we are fighting a great war, and this is the point, to see whether this nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. Because that's the philosophy of our founders. It's an experiment. It's an experiment, this country. Can it rest upon those principles? Freedom, equality, rule of law. And here we are in the midst of it. Here we are. Can we? And none of us knows. None of us knows. All we know is that we can try. All we know, as you said, we can do our best. That's it. That's it. But that's what you're trying to do. And that's what you've been trying to do in this organization for quite a few years. And that's what you have quite a lot of people going out and actually doing it. So we have 3 languages where they produce a challenge, and we are in a building where they tried to meet it. And we are in an organization that itself is trying to meet that challenge. And all I can say is thank you for recognizing me as a part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Justice Breyer, and we will hear a bit more from him after a video from our World Jurist Association President Javier Cremades to introduce the conversation that Hilary Bass and I will have with the Justice at the conclusion of the video. And I invite those of you who are here to, if you would, retake your seats during the course of the video. Thank you.
We're coming to a very particular moment of this gathering at the United Nations headquarters of this presentation of the World Law Congress July 2021. And this is the opportunity to have a conversation with Stephen Breyer, Justice Breyer, about the rule of law, new horizons for the rule of law. Probably in Stephen Breyer's life, as in any of our lives, there are many different life stages. Probably childhood, youth, education, but then in professional life is staying on the bench as a member, as a justice of the US Supreme Court, and then being a justice retired. On those times, I came to speak with him and say, Stephen, would you like to help me in promoting the rule of law around the world? And we had a first conversation. Stephen, you remember that? When I asked you this, what is the rule of law for you?
Rule of law is tough. I found out a very good statement. We had a very good conversation. A woman who is Chief Justice of Ghana shows up in my office in Washington, and she's trying to do very good things, and I think she's been successful in part in trying to make the system more responsive to democratic imperatives, protection of human rights, and so forth. She asked me this question: why do Americans do what you say? That's not such a bad question. And it's really a question of custom and history. And there have been times when they haven't. And we've had civil wars, as you well know. And we've had slavery, and we've had all kinds of things. So the best that I could do was to tell her a few of those things and say, over a long time, you can develop habits. But the important thing is for the citizens who are not lawyers. You know, we have 331 million people in the United States, and 330 million people are not lawyers. And those are the people who have to decide that they will follow the law and what judges say, even if they think it's wrong. And is it wrong? Yeah, sometimes it is wrong. If we have a 5-4 decision, somebody's wrong. And you like it? No, I don't like it. You don't want to follow it? Yes, I don't want to follow it. Will you follow it? Yeah. When they're willing to say that, because they see the alternatives are worse, because they look at television and see what happens in countries where they don't say that, at that point, we have the beginning of a rule of law. And so you have to convince, and the lawyers have to convince. The judges, they can't convince anybody because they're self-interested. But the lawyers can, and the others can. hey, Mr. Person in village, Mr. Person in the town, men and women in cities and towns who are not lawyers, it's in your interest. It's in your interest to follow a rule of law, and that means agreeing with cases or following them even when you don't like them. When you have that, you begin to have a rule of law. And when you have that, you begin to have a weapon that can be used against people being arbitrary, capricious, dictatorial, etc.
We had at that time a great conversation that the Spanish king and many other personalities from around the globe just attended in Madrid, and you were present through video. At this time, it's the opposite. You are present there, and I'm participating by video. But two of my best colleagues are going to lead the conversation with you. I just want to say thank you. When I came to you, you are so busy with different commitments, and you also need some time for yourself to think, write, work, and reflect. And when I say to you, we need you, because you could be a role model for anyone around the world who really want to devote their life to promote the rule of law. And then you just say, yes, I will be there, and I will help you. So thank you, my friend, Stephen Breyer. Thank you for what you have done. Congratulations to you, to your family, not for today's conversation, today's speech, but for your whole life of being just always available in different phases, in different life stages, to be always a strong pillar of the rule of law. Thank you, and enjoy the conversation.
So, Justice, it's clear in your statement today, as well as your writings, the importance of the rule of law in your personal philosophy. But one of the quotes that you have written that I have relied upon before is the following: the important divisions in the world are not geographical, racial, or religious, but between those who believe in a rule of law and those who do not. So I ask you, how are we doing? How are we doing in the US, and how are we doing in the rest of the world as far as aspiring to achieve that recognition of the rule of law?
I'm a partisan. I mean, I want to say not perfectly, but not too bad, but not, I think I'd have the same reaction as most of the people in the audience. There are a few things I'm not too happy about, and there are quite a few I am, so there we are. That's a really good answer, doesn't say anything.
Well, it was referenced that we were privileged at the ABA to have you at the helm of our Rule of Law initiative, which is a project that's been at work in countries all over the world for a very long time. And it does everything from judicial training to election monitoring, micro-lending. There's just a whole wide range of things that the Rule of Law initiative does. And I wondered, in your busy life, you made time to chair this important work. Talk, if you would, about the why behind that and why you think those sorts of projects make a difference to the rule of law.
That is a question I don't have an answer to, but I have a thought. And is this the case? I mean, why suddenly does it seem so difficult in places that you wouldn't expect it? That it's not exactly rule of law, but people are having a hard time getting on. Harder than they normally did, except we've had some bad times, but we seem in not a perfect time at the moment. And one of the things I think of, which may or may not be true, is there's a tremendous increase in the world's population. There is a tremendous problem with the environment. You put those things together and you discover an awful lot of people may be suffering from tornadoes, hurricanes, not enough food, not good jobs where they have. And I was impressed by a show I saw on French television where you just saw trucks, dust and trucks coming up from the southern or middle southern part of Africa up to Morocco, where they were going to go fish. And they were all getting off those trucks and they were fishing squids and various things, which they weren't supposed to. They weren't. Why? What are you going to do? How are you going to feed your family? There's no job down there. And I heard Jacques Chirac say once, which I thought was a very good point. He said, people are coming into your countries. They're coming into our countries. They're not supposed to. How are you going to stop them? How? They'll come. They'll walk. They'll find an old boat. They will come. There is only one way to stop them, and that is you make the conditions in those countries where they come from good enough that they'll stay. And believe me, they'll stay with conditions that aren't perfect because it's their home. And so we have a lot of people walking. We have environment beyond belief problems, I think worse than people tend to think. We have the growth of the population, the hurricanes, the fires, the rising of sea level maybe coming about, et cetera, et cetera. And then I saw one person, I'm not buying into this because I don't want to make too many enemies, but I heard a report of the election a few years ago down in Oklahoma. He said, the people who voted against me, said this man, who's a very nice man running for office, he said, what they're afraid of is Hollywood. Why? They're afraid of Hollywood because they're afraid their children will not be able to lead what you'd call the founded life that I've led, says the parent. So there are many things. And the book that made me frightened of fear was written during World War II. If you haven't read it, it's worth reading. High Wind in Jamaica, Robert Hughes. And in that book, where they're in Jamaica, a girl, a young girl, 12 years old, has a pet, a cat. And the cat loves her, and she loves the cat. All right? A hurricane comes, lightning comes down, the cat springs at her and would have torn out her eyes. The cat was frightened. And so I think his point, well, of course he's writing about that time, but his point is fear is something to be afraid of, really afraid of, because suddenly ordinary ways of behaving go out the window. So I've just listed a few things you can find in any newspaper, any article, etc. But they're there now, and they do provoke fear, and they do mean, I think, from our point of view, that we have to work harder at saying, I'm so sorry. You have such a good point. I understand it. But you have to learn to live together in communities. And you cannot live together in communities, particularly with people who don't agree with you, and many will not. They think a lot of different things. But you can't live together in communities and get anywhere without a rule of law, a little technical, a little et cetera, and has a lot of parts to it, and you're going to all fall asleep before I finish the parts. But nonetheless, that's why I think you say we've worked hard, work harder, work harder. Children, grandchildren, all those people. Bring them into the act. Go and talk to the schools. Tell the 12th graders. They like it. Actually, they're interested in it. They're interested in what we say. They pretend they're not. But at least if you say you're their grandfather, they'll be a little interested some of the time. But there we are.
So one of the things that you've really focused on throughout your career is this view that American courts and American judges should learn from and be educated about foreign courts and foreign judicial systems. And I wonder if you could explain your perspective on that.
Well, I'll say more than that. You have limited time. But one of the things, surprisingly large number of cases in front of the Supreme Court and in other courts, one of the things that is much more perhaps than it used to be, I'm not sure, but that it actually helps to know something about what's going on in some foreign country. After all, if you take Western Europe, I mean, they have similar basic values. Latin America, a lot of the world. Similar basic values, similar judiciaries, similar constitutions, and lo and behold, similar problems. And I'm certainly not saying copy whatever they do, not at all. But suppose somebody writes something. Suppose a person with a job like me, a judge, has a problem like mine. right in front of him or her, and they have a document somewhat like mine. Huh. And they have a system that isn't that different. Why don't I read what they say? I mean, I don't have to agree with it, but I might learn something. You never know. And so that's the kind of thing. And this is what, if I wanted to say one thing that impressed me along those lines, it was this. We had a copyright case. I like copyright. Not everybody does. It's an interesting field. But, okay, in this case, there was a young man from Thailand who was studying in Cornell, and he was discovered that his textbooks, which were scientific, were on sale in Bangkok at about half the price, in English. And so he bought it. He had his parents send him one. No, why one? Let's try 2, 3, 4. Before you know it, he had something really going up there in Ithaca and beyond. And the publisher got a little annoyed and sued him. And the case got to our court. And I'm not interested at the moment, I'm sorry to say, who won, who would lose, but the briefs that came in that case, they were from all over the world. They were from Japan, and of course from Thailand, and from Canada, and from France, and from a whole lot of different countries. And one of the briefs, the lawyer was very good, explains this. He says, you got a lot of briefs here. And the reason you have so many briefs, and I don't know why they call them briefs either, they're not briefs. But but one of the reasons you have all these people writing you is that your answer to this case is going to be worth $3 trillion. See, Everett Dirksen used to say $1 billion was a lot of money. Well, what do you think of 3 trillion? Okay, so yeah, that is the world, and that is the world whether people are or are not saying it's less. What's the word? Globalization. I don't care. You can go on Jeopardy and say it's 2% up or 4% down or something. That's not the point. Whether we like it or whether we don't like it, there they are. Business is more universal. People go back and forth. Our law of copyright does affect people abroad, and their laws will affect mine. And go read Henry Friendly's opinion. I think a lot of them would have been different if he'd been writing today, because it's a different world today. Okay, yeah, you get the point. You get the point. That's why, because it's part of us. We better know it. If you don't like it, I'm sorry. Go become a physicist or something else.
Justice Breyer, you've been incredibly generous with your time, but before we let you go, you've written a bunch of books over the years, and I understand you are writing another one now, and I wonder if you might share with all of us something about your next book.
Well, writing a book is an awful experience. It really is. But I felt I should, and I wanted to write a book, basically, what I think of as a traditional way of resolving statutory difficulties in front of a court and constitutional difficulties. And that's a different way than what seems to be growing in popularity, or which is called textualism and originalism. And so this book, which will be long enough, probably the theme is interpreting statutes and the Constitution and why I'm right and everybody else is wrong.
All right, as I invite Diego Solano to come to the podium, please thank Justice Breyer for wonderful remarks.
So we're almost over, and as you know, Javier Cremades, the president of the World Jurist Association, couldn't make it, unfortunately. He asked me to just share very brief ideas with you guys before closing this extraordinary event. And first of all, I think, at least for me, it's been an extraordinary, fruitful, and productive discussions. I have learned a lot. Really high-level discussion, so thank you for all the speakers and all the people who've been involved in the organization. This is just really an appetizer of what's going to happen on July 21st. We will have 400 speakers from 100 countries. We will have around 50 panels, like the one we have earlier this morning, about a wide variety of issues. And there will be general prosecutors, head of states, chief justice, legal practitioners, students. So really the international legal community. We are basically trying to follow the path started by Chief Justice L. Warren and the President of the American Bar Association, Charles Ryan. So 60 years later, the World Jurist Association is coming back to the United States, to the United Nations, it's coming back to the American Bar Association, and it's coming back to the United States. So I hope that we can meet there and continue this conversation. Next edition of July 20, 21st, I think it's very important, particularly if I'm a European, I'm a Spaniard. So we are delivering, presenting the World Peace and Liberty Award to the European Union. And it's been said before by other speakers, but really the European Union, in my view, is nothing else but the legal construction, a legal architecture that has allowed a continent with wars for years, for millenniums, and we were referring before to the Second World War. So fortunately, the European Union, that it was made basically by jurists, promoting free trade, promoting democracy, promoting independence of judges, has allowed our continent to not have more wars, or at least not within the European Union. Unfortunately, other countries of Europe have not been able to to reach peace through law. That was one really of the purpose of this organization. Finally, I just would ask you a favor, mainly to not only to the New Yorkers, but mainly to the New Yorkers, to help us in spreading the word. We are promoting peace through law. We are promoting rule of law as the only alternative to tyranny, to arbitrariness, to dictatorship. And I hope that we'll see you all there, and we present the World Peace and Liberty Award to the European Union, and it will be presented to the President of the European Union, Ursula von der Leyen. So thank you very much. It was a great day today. Thank you to all the awardees, and particularly to Justice Breyer, and also to Hilary Bass and Patricia Lee Rifo. Thank you, both of you particularly, and Deborah, of course. And thank you very much. See you on July.